or grow it. From the Stack Podcast.
Thanks to our sponsors, AC Infinity. Looking for an easy way to improve air circulation in your grow tent? Well, check out AC Infinity's clip-on oscillating fan. It's compact and can easily be attached to your tent poles, providing targeted airflow exactly where you need it. With 10-speed settings and automatic oscillation, you can customize the fan's airflow to suit your plant's needs at different stages of growth. And because it's IP44 rated, it's resistant to high humidity and heat, perfect for your grow environment. These oscillating clip-on fans can also be connected to your Controller 6.9 Pro to be able to have everything dialed in perfectly for your garden. If you want to upgrade your grow tent today, make sure you get that clip-on oscillating fan from AC Infinity. And don't forget to use discount code TheStash15 at checkout to save a little extra on your purchase.
Yeah,
click on the camera.
Hey, how's it going, George?
Click the camera button.
I'm on the road right now. I don't know what you guys are gonna see. I mean, not a lot unless you want to see the Northern Illinois.
No, that's okay.
Look at me. Here I am. Breaking all the rules. Yeah, breaking all the rules.
Hey, you know what? We don't want you to get hurt.
That's not real.
Yeah, keep it down. We're gonna put a beautiful picture of your mug over there. And what we're gonna do? Do you remember watching America's Funniest Home Videos back in the day when they would just put the giant head over top of what's his name? That's all.
Change the mouth and then.
That's fine.
Yeah.
George, thank you for joining us today, man. We really appreciate it. We know that you told us where you'd be, and we said we need you for this, and here you are. So thank you for being here, man.
That's cool, man. Yeah, is this the 5 o'clock free stash giveaway?
Yeah,
pretty much, man. We've been doing it. We've been pushing out. They've had a lot of people already buying them. A shout out to all the love we've gotten there, which is great. And it's been awesome, man. It's been awesome. 4+ hours.
It's been a great response. We've got a ton of people watching right now. We've got a ton of love through the chat. We've had a ton of. It's just been a great day. We have a ton of great guests. And George, man, we just want to kind of dive into the blend. You know, actually, when we take a break around here, it's your face that plays, answering some of the questions that we've had in regards to the blend. And is it compatible with this? Will it work with this? What's here? What's that? How's this derived? And but before we get into all that, we just kind of wanted to get just your idea, your concept. What role did you play in bringing this all together?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good question. I mean, I think we had a lot of brilliant people. Hey, what's on the market today? How could it be made better, right? And certainly, I was a part of that, but I think there were a lot of other great people. I mean, you guys on the show obviously provided your thoughts and feedbacks, as we're talking and discussions. And so it was a group of people, a nucleus that started, and it kind of grew from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll take credit. I like that. I've been doing it most of these episodes. I had a lot to do with it. I have a lab coat. No.
Yep, we got you.
Yeah, you do good. But I think it's a lot of it is about, how I use the analogy is like we just wanted a smoothie with all the right nutrients, and you help break down a lot of stuff. We were like, oh, that can go in there and this can be added as well. And you're like, yeah. And really got to a point where I learned more about inputs of things that I didn't have any idea were usable. Again, the biggest one for me that stood out was just the word liquor. I'm like, huh? What you talking about? And that was that corn steep liquor. That was one that's interesting, and I haven't seen it, and I've been reading more about it lately. It's getting more of a trend into this space. But what's a little bit of a background on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's technically it's a byproduct from the actual processing of the corn itself, right? But and it sounds horrible to say it's a byproduct, but there's a lot of really great pieces in that. It's kind of like that last run of molasses that you get off of sugar production, right? When you get sugar production, you get the byproduct molasses, but there's a lot of minerals and amino acids, and it's the same thing in corn steep liquor, right? Really nice mineral content, really nice ratio of NPK. You got calcium, you got magnesium in there, you got micronutrients, you've got amino acids, proteins, peptides, sugars that are in there. So it's a really nice starting blend for growing, not only for growing biology, right? It's anytime you're going to grow biology in a space, you're going to want to have food sources of biology as well, right? And so it's a really nice mix. It's not easy to come by, and it's not easy to handle or formulate with because it's a little hygroscopic. But we've worked and addressed this, and we'll keep working on that front. But it's great base, right? And that was the starting point.
Yeah, I think, one thing that's on a lot of people's mind, and it's something too I feel like we definitely needed to get out there, was heavy metals in this. Is that something that we're going to be able to discuss a little bit? Like you would discuss better than us,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah, for sure. I mean, test in hand, I believe we do anyways. We're supposed to.
Yep.
And again, everything that we work with is going to be really good from a heavy metals perspective, right? Just because we know the industry standards when we start working with this. The other thing that helps is that this is a fairly low use rate product, right? So we're not dumping this in here by the pound full. It's a targeted product, low use rate. 2 grams. You're going out once a week. So there's really not going to be a lot of concern there about heavy metals.
That makes sense. I know with the next thing, the extract of the seaweed, I think a lot of people would be worried about heavy metals kind of being involved in that as well. But that's an extraction process, right? So it's pure. Yeah. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's also where the seaweed comes from, right? I mean, you got seaweed all over the world, right? And some of it is great, like off the coast of Ireland where we get it, or off the coast of Norway where we've gotten it before, but we like the Irish Ascophyllum nodosum a little bit better. And some it's just awful, right? Some it's just like seaweed by name. And I'm not quite sure what it is. It's coming from another country and you just don't know, right? This material that we get, we've formulated with this seaweed for literally decades now. And we have a concentrated seaweed product that we've used and we've sold out in the environment and passes heavy metal tests without a problem. So the fact that we put it in here as an ingredient, as an admixture in what we're doing, zero concerns about the heavy metals of what that is, where it's coming from. We know how it tests out, even on its own in concentrate. So that's not a problem. Now, when you start talking about seaweed, you start talking about formulating with seaweed or the availability of seaweed in the microbes. There's a lot of lignin. I mean, it's a plant, kind of plant-based material where you got the cell walls. There's a lot of lignin in there. There's a lot of cellulose. There's a lot of things that aren't soluble. And so what we do is all the water-soluble elements out of that seaweed, right? All the metabolites that we like that help with, the rooting and the plant health and the plant growth. All the amino acids that we like, all that gets stripped out in that extraction process. And all the stuff that really is just kind of fibrous, not water soluble, it is technically organic matter, but it's not going to break down in the short growth cycles that we have. Really, we've just eliminated all that and we've concentrated this down. And I think it's kind of a microcosm of the stash blend in its entirety. Because what we've really tried to do is we've tried to take something that's, really kind of an imprecise process where you've got teas and you've got all this other sort of stuff going on. It's organic matter. And we've really tried to condense it down into a concentrated extract that allows you to use it at low use rates, but get that response that you want to see, right, with the plant.
Wink, and just big shout out to Wink. That was slick there, just putting up the video.
I know.
George, and I was like,
I was like, he's here.
Oh. Yeah, it tripped me out for a minute. That was good.
Thank you for breaking that down. Did you want to follow that up, Chris, or was that you?
Well, I was going to get into the potassium hydroxide, how that's kind of involved with it, right? So
okay, go ahead.
That's another thing that's on the label, which I think we need to talk about, which is potassium hydroxide used in the extraction process for the seaweed extract. And you had mentioned, I know there's labeling restrictions. We kind of touched upon this earlier in the stream here. But labeling restrictions, it must be on there, yet it's not really in there anymore because it's used for the extraction process. Can you talk to us about how potassium hydroxide is kind of in this blend or used for this blend?
It is, definitely a labeling requirement. It says, hey, if you're going to do a seaweed extract, you've got to use the extractant that you've used to get there. And for us, it's potassium hydroxide, right? And there actually may be some residual potassium that's in the product, which is fine. It's actually going to help and be beneficial. But what's left at the end of this is not potassium hydroxide. It's going to react with the natural acids that's in the seaweed itself, right? So you've got, potassium citrate or potassium acetate or potassium aspartate or potassium glutamate, these amino acids or these organic acids that are in the mix. So you end up with a product that's, not a pH of 14. You end up with a product that's a pH, of 8, 7, right? So but again, it's a weird sort of law from a labeling perspective that says, you've got to put potassium hydroxide on there because that's what it's, quote, derived, no longer potassium hydroxide. It's just, we could have a whole show on labeling laws and, the spirit of the law versus what it's actually accomplishing. But that's a little bit of background to it.
Thank you. We're getting a lot of questions in regards, and we want to be 100% transparent. We're getting a lot of questions in regards, can you use this in hydroponic? And you were very forthcoming with us in regards to, unfortunately, there's just some elements that are water soluble and some that aren't. And how does that play a significance in whether or not people can use this in hydroponic or not?
Yeah, I think you're going to have issues in deep water culture without any soil at all, because, like I said, there are some insoluble elements that will, through biology in the soil, begin to work in the soil and turn soluble through enzymatic processes, either chemically from the plant or biologically from the biology that are in there. But the mycorrhizae that's in there, the bacteria that's in there, happier in an environment where you've got, oxygen exchange going on in a soil type environment, right? So really you're not going to get all the benefits of this product, first and foremost, if you use it in hydroponic scenario versus if you use it in a soilless media or soil scenario, right? But you've got some water inside in there, and the silicon dioxide is chief among those in the plant from a silicon perspective. That has to change into ortho or monoclinic acid, right? And so, the protonation process case, and that comes from enzymatic, and it comes from acid releases from the roots in concentrate, and you're just not going to have that in a hydroponic situation. So you're going to have some precipitate there. If you really, really, really want to get it out, and run it through a mesh filter, and then have the extract go in your hydroponics. But even then, you've got now a lot of biology in there. You got to make sure your oxygen content in the water is good. There's some questions that you're going to start to have come up there. So we didn't design it for that purpose. We think the big soilless media is soil.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you for that. Well, you broke up a little bit there as it went through, but I think we got the general idea that, if you're using filters, there's water soluble and non-soluble water soluble elements. So we just don't recommend that you use it in hydroponics. So it's a great question. We appreciate you guys that think about supporting us too. We had a great question too from Keith asking, heard it has a polymer in it similar to Flava. Is there one of my favorite parts is how we've managed to replicate the polymer extraction, and that has to do with the ocean creatures. What are they called?
Musks.
Musks
the
there's a process. Mollusks. Yeah, there's a process that it keeps on the shell to create polymer to. George,
take over anytime.
Yeah, please. Yeah. How did we make that happen?
Yeah, I would say it's a similar flavor to the flavor, similar polymer. Yeah, the idea behind the polymer, of course, is that mollusks, when they build, which are primarily calcium scaffolding, right? They have to pull that calcium out of the ocean water to be able to do that, right? Can you hear me all right? Just checking.
Yep.
Okay. So they've got to pull the calcium out of the water, and to do that, they complex it with a polymeric acid, right? And so that's kind of where the science came from, kind of where the idea came from. And what happens is that when you take aspartic acid, which is an amino acid, food grade amino acid, you would hook them together to form a chain of 30 or 35 different links there. It has a negative charge, and so it will grab on the nutrients. It's fully biodegradable, and it certainly anchors. It's another component of this stash mix where you have the mycorrhizae working with the plant, you have the bacteria working on the nutrients, and then you have this chemical this biodegradable polymer that's, basically what mollusks build out, inspired by nature, also working to help with nutrient uptake. So it's a synergistic approach. And oh, by the way, it's a terrific food source for the biology itself. So it will break down over the course of, depending on the biology load, from 1 to 2 to 3 months, and a continuous feed, and it does a great job with feeding the biology as well as help with the nutrients in the plant.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I get that question a lot. People are thinking polymer is just another sales gimmick, and hearing how it helps with the uptake of nutrients, and as you just mentioned, because I'm not going to repeat it, that's why we included it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's Absolutely. I mean, we sell the world over, right? It's manufactured right in Illinois. We've got a multi-story reactor that it's super clean process. We just use heat, exceptionally high heat. There's obviously a few things to the reactor that gets it done, but yeah, it's not hocus pocus. It's on millions around the world today, so it's a real thing.
We had another question in the chat. First of all, we know that this can be in organic systems as well, or if used in synthetic bottled nutrients. So Stash Blend is in addition to your base nutrients. But one of the things that we talked about earlier on the stream, you weren't around for it, and we actually talked about it when we were connected through video, was sprinkling onto the roots, how you mentioned that it could potentially dry it out. It wasn't tested. So we have a question that kind of relates to that is it safe to use with worms in the system? Because I guess they're worried about maybe the worms drying out, for example.
Yeah, it's I don't have a problem. You're putting 2 grams, per gallon or for a half gallon, or however you want to deliver that 2 grams into your container there. It's sufficiently dilute. You don't really have anything other than some minerals, amino acids, things like that in there. I don't see any reason why it would cause harm to a vermiculture at all. I mean, we were talking about taking a dry powder and dipping it into roots, and when you get into that concentration, from electrical conductivity perspective, are we pulling water out of the roots? If you threw this concentrated powder on the worms, would you have the same sort of thing where you're pulling water out of the worms? It's just osmosis, right? Where the salt concentration is highest, that's where the water is going to flow. But in our scenarios that we're talking about here, we're talking about diluting it in water first and pouring it into the soil. So I wouldn't have any bit of problem using it in a culture where I thought there might be beneficial organisms. Not at all.
Another great question. Hallsack 420 asks, how far into the grow should this be added into watering?
Yeah, that's good. I would say as soon as possible, number one. So, when you transplant and go out week 1, that's probably when I would start it. We know that the mycorrhiza is going to take multiple weeks to establish. We know there's a lot of short-term benefits in there as well. Getting it started early is going to get that mycorrhiza to start growing and establishing, so it'll be there in that week 4, 5, 6 when you really need to click in, and then onwards. And it's going to help with nutrient uptake in that cycle of the crop. And I don't know if you guys talked about it already, but obviously we want to use this thing on a weekly basis until you get up into your flowering stage, and then from there, the mycorrhiza established. You've got an established community of bacteria. The polymer's built up there, and it's going to carry you through to the rest of the cycle and the harvest.
Real quick, George, you kind of cut off for a half a second when you said you can feed this all the way every week, or all the way through the veg until you get to flower, and then it came back around after mycorrhiza.
Gotcha. Yeah, until you get to flower, and then you'll let it be, because you'll have everything established at that point in time. And I don't think the return on investment is going to be as strong later on in the crop, but early on.
So as you guys can kind of hear,
say that part because we're too good for the people. They just want it cut off.
Russia stepped in. No,
way too good.
You heard it. He said you have no problem using it weekly throughout every watering, all the way through veg, and then as you get to flower, you're gonna be able to taper it back and let it go. Let those cultures establish and exist within the pot.
Now, one thing to mention is that we were using it. All 3 of us were using it every watering all the way up to the end, so it's totally safe to do that. If you're reusing soil, that's something that we really didn't talk about behind the scenes. If you're reusing the soil, you're gonna have another plant in there. Sure, you can go ahead and do it all the way up until the end, because you have a new plant coming in there right afterwards, and you'll reap the benefits, no problem.
Yeah, for sure, agree with that.
I fed it all the way.
I've been tapering off as I'm going into flower. So yeah, I'm going to keep that going. And see, I only use half a teaspoon when I'm doing it. I keep it pretty low, and it seems totally adequate. I had to dial back when I was doing my synthetic base nutrients. I had to dial those back a little bit because I was just seemingly getting a little toxicity in multiple areas. It's nuts. And so with this having the slight macros in it, I think that really helps you get your K, so to speak, that a lot of people are after with their 3 numbers on front of the bag. What was the thought process behind having the macros in there? If you don't mind me asking. I mean, I think talk behind the scenes just to...
Yeah, to me, it's some sort of food source of biology too, right? So it's readily available, mineral organic based feedstock that's going to be built in for the biology, but also for the plants. And there's a synergy there when you've got something built in directly for the biology right off the bat. Obviously available to the plant also in a supplemental number. But we were surprised when they first started fooling around with just using it. And again, it's pretty popular as an organic nutrient source. Even sometimes the main supplier of nutrients in an organic source. And there's just a lot to it other than just the minerals that are in there as well. But we saw tremendous response from that in my old agricultural days in specialty ag, running it through drip irrigation and things like that. There's more to there than you realize, and when you build it in with the biology, it makes sense. To me, it made sense.
Yeah, especially as we're trying to have something as a blend. The thought process when we came together was making it so there wasn't 10 bottles or bags or a bunch of things people needed to get. And some people still want that, to be able to dial things into the T, especially if you're getting into crop steering and going maybe in the commercial route. I know a lot of people with Canacribs, with the consultation there, they may go in a different direction, but this being the additive, it doesn't take away from a lot of those things, I feel, especially when you're dealing with your macros. So when it comes to putting this into systems, obviously we wouldn't put it through auto watering as much. You think it would be soluble to go through there and deal with like a line system, or no?
Yeah, probably not. Like I said, there's definitely some insoluble materials that are in there. I probably wouldn't start there if I were doing it.
Yeah, so it'd be more for the hand watering application, which does make sense, especially with this. And then given that, like we talked before, it being like you're ready to go tea, instead of having to do the whole brew, it's just a pour and mix. You got your, quality ready to go mix. And I think that's really where this comes into place for a lot of people, even those on the synthetic side,
Yeah, it's ready to go, and it's predictable, right? You're getting from a CFU count and from an input count every time you do it, right? I think there's a lot of variability when you start making, your own teas, and not that this wouldn't be a great starter for that if you want to build onto it and do something, beyond what we're talking about here. You just mix it in water, let it roll. But I think to me, it's that taking control over that process and knowing what you're going to get every time, and it's just an instant tea that says, "Hey, this is it. I mix this in. I'm good to go."
Yeah.
So soil drench is the recommended application. Mix it up into water, whether it be half teaspoon to 1 teaspoon per gallon of water. Question in the chat for those that are tuning in on YouTube. We're actually streaming this live on Twitch right now and actually on YouTube. But usually we're on Twitch every single week, and we are streaming and we're taking questions today. So one of the questions was, when you do mix it up in water, how long can it sit in that mixture? That question's for George.
Yeah.
How long can it sit in the mixture? Are there going to be any adverse effects if it's sitting there for
George
days or what?
Well, I said this. I make sure my phone didn't die. I'm just looking at a still face here. It's a good question, because as soon as that biology hits that water, it's going to start multiplying, right? So you're going to start going through the food source there. I don't think we've done any prolonged studies there, but I would say, control environment outside the sun, you probably leave it around for a day or two, pretty good to go. You get beyond that bacteria is going to start to chew through a lot of its food source, and and oxygen too in that water too. So how oxygenated is that water? And I would probably not leave it around too long.
I think the question was, if I may, was kind of directed towards possibly keeping it in a reservoir, maybe. But as we kind of mentioned, that the best
Water
application is
solubility.
a soil drench because of water solubility. For the same reason you wouldn't put it in a hydroponic system, you're not going to put it in a reservoir because that some of those things are going to break down.
Agreed.
I think this is understanding of using a powder-based like a dry nutrient, and kind of understanding how that goes. And traditionally, you just wouldn't usually do that. You don't want it to just sit, depending on how it was formulated. But I feel like a lot of times people will just try it. Prime example, like I would love to eventually get a stash blend like liquid version, which of course, water is what water is. But there's a lot of people who are using hydroponics, and it would be cool to be able to cater to that. But then not being able to have all the same stuff.
We
but
can't
the same
pack
effect.
the same punch.
Well, potentially with different ingredients, though, is what it is.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because when you look at
sure. Yeah.
It would look a little different for sure. Yeah, it would look a little different. But yeah, could we get there? An approximation? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think so.
I can see that being the future for sure. Well, I was just gonna say, because a lot of people in the commercial settings, it's a little more about speed and delivery and ROI. So you see a ton of people focusing on liquid-based nutrients. That's why Ventana does so well, and a lot of brands like that, because it's commercial based. It's focused on that setting, so you can get that crop steering going. And I feel like we're catering pretty heavily to the home grower, but this still is applicable to that commercial grow. It's just for the hand watering, whereas where it's different. So it's really a craft grow.
Yeah,
it's kind of a smaller family.
You're right, craft grow, like in large craft grows too. Like I've got an operation near me with 1,800 plants, which whether that's craft or not, I can still consider that pretty craft. And they water everything by hand. Everything's still watered by hand. Wow. So yeah, by one guy.
What?
Yeah.
With the water boy.
That's pretty crafty.
He's the grower. He's
the water man.
The guy. Wow. The grower is the guy. It's dedication. That's passion. But that's, as I've mentioned, that's the difference between craft and corporate. But anyways, that's a different discussion. What I did want to focus on too, and when this really excites me, is this: I get to be the Billy Mays of the group, and I can say that we're inside the Stash Blend. We don't offer just one beneficial bacteria, not just two beneficial, not just three, but four beneficial bacterias. This is, and I'm not going to mention any other products here, but we do often get compared to another product. To homies, real homies, and this, our product is not like any other product for multiple reasons. But we lost him there but not for multiple reasons, but for the
some
bacteria.
Of it was consciously that though too. When we were putting it together, we were like, we don't want to compete with people.
We don't even.
Who's got a different regimen.
Different. This is a totally different product than any product or the product that you're probably thinking of in regards to. But
Elephant in the Room, shout out to Dude Grows. Great guys. They've been on the show for our charity events.
We
awesome
love them.
people. So that once you read the package and you learn literally the people we've had on it. Yeah, exactly. The people we've had on here to explain what these inputs are. I really think it'll be good for people to see what they want and what they don't, because you don't necessarily have to use any of these things. Like I said, you can run it low and steady and do decent, or you can take it to the next level. And with this, it'd be a supplemental thing. If you're using, let's say, even like Grow Dots in this, I'd be a little concerned. You know what I'm saying? Because Grow Dots is the slow release and it works the way it does. As we're Recharge or Great White or Mycos or any of those other brands, boom. Ours is a little different formula.
There's an application for whatever you're using. That's really what it is. And again, we have all the respect for these guys, and we really don't want to get conflated our products. There's two different products. That's just trying to compare, nitrogen with CalMag. It's two different things. They just both come in a bottle, in case of liquid nutrients. So I just want to make that very clear. But it was the bacteria that I really wanted to focus on. And of course, we can sit and talk about it all day. Is George back? Is he close?
Yep.
George Jetson, baby, back from the future.
Let's bring him in. Okay, so did you catch the question, George?
Repeat the question. What do you got?
In regards to bacteria, this is something that really stands us apart. This was the importance of my question, is that we don't offer 1, 2, or 3 beneficial bacteria. We have 4 beneficial bacteria within our blend, and they play a significant role in the entire process. And I just wanted you to touch on that, because we've talked about it, but it doesn't mean the same coming out of our mouths as it does yours. Our lead scientist.
That's fair. That's fair. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. I mean, high level, we've talked about this forum. You guys had probably said this, is that when you're putting in bacteria, the question is why, right? Why am I putting in bacteria, right? And then Some cases you want to, put in bacteria that's going to chew through organic matter or whatnot. And so I've certainly played around with that. But in this case here, we're all about plant health and about nutrient uptake, right? And when you look at the 4 species that are in there, you're either in this kind of plant health bucket, or you're in this, nutrient uptake, side of the things. And that's, kind of how we wanted to get there. And we wanted to use robust species that we knew we could ferment, we knew we could grow predictably, to maximize the CFU, the colony forming unit count, something that's going to withstand, the lyophilization or spray drying process, and allow us to concentrate that down in the blend there. So there's kind of like this Venn diagram we played around with when we did that. But that's overarching. That's kind of what we accomplish, between is plant health and nutrient uptake.
One of the ones that stand out there, and I can't even pronounce it for the life of me, Pambacillus azotufixans, which is the
exactly what I would have said.
That.
Well done.
But that's the nitrogen fixer, right? So it's actually grabbing nitrogen from the air and converting into a form that the plant can use, right?
It is, yeah, it absolutely is. And before the Haber-Bosch process came along, where we could take nitrogen out of the air and wrangle it into a usable form, this is how nitrogen got fixed in the ecosystem, right? So it was things along these lines of these types of that's able to enzymatically fix the nitrogen and make it usable. Yes.
That's another thought process, again, with this being a blend. It wasn't just a one-off thing. It's like we wanted to be able to have a variety of beneficial things, not just beneficial bacteria, and I like that it's got a synergistic approach with everything. It's kind of thought where how the next adds on to the next and adds on to the next. It's definitely very well thought through. Yeah,
there's, you tied it in together. And I always use the roulette analogy, right? You're at the table, you've got red, you got black, you got a bunch of numbers, different environments, different plans, different situations, different everything. We wanted to build together a robust mix that was going to give you results, whether it landed on 37 black or 46 red, right? I mean, it's just that's kind of how we built this thing out.
Hell yeah, I love it, man. And that's selfishly what I was hoping for myself for the garden. So this is where, like most things, if you find use for yourself, some of the best inventions or best things out there, period, come from actual use for yourself. And now it's going to the public. And being able to use this as long as we have. I haven't been posting much garden stuff because I'm using this constantly as my thing. Like, how are you just using those little 2 pieces and then that random brown bag? I'm just like, well, I don't know. I have no idea. So now it's nice to be able to come out and talk about it. And like we've been holding a lot back, but a lot more about how we actually go about making this. And I think the biggest thing that a lot of people are looking at, of course, is where it's sourced. And like you covered that a lot with the seaweed extract. With the microbes, like these are all, of course, ethically sourced. That's a big thing. A lot of the community, myself included, a lot of the stuff you guys already deal with, you've already got for other nutrients or other products you're using. So it's not like we're kind of going out of our way to just take this from some sort of environment that we're depleting, correct? Hopefully.
No. This is fermentation based, right? So we're taking sugar-based feedstocks. We've got our beginning concentrate of colony forming units, and we put those in. You ferment it, and then you encapsulate it. And you spray dry it with a sugar-based feedstock or a polymer feedstock with it, and that's where it comes from. So you're feeding in some couple of bits of minerals there, some oxygen here and there while it's going through the fermentation process, and then away you go. So using some sugar and using some water in the process, and a little bit of minerals that obviously come back out in the mix and get used by the plants again. So fermentation, and God, that's another subject of the show here. And you talk about industrial biotechnology, and you talk about all the things not only in our agrochemical sector but also in the food sector now, about what industrial fermentation is going to bring and how much better it is for the environment. I mean, I saw something the other day, a bit off topic, but not quite, where they're actually going through and fermenting certain pieces of proteins and whatnot that you would normally get from dairy. And, your carbon footprint is like 96% less when you're able to go through this concentrated fermentation process versus feeding a cow and going through and getting milk, right? So it's kind of really interesting science.
George, I remember the conversation. That was very important to us about ethically sourced and making sure that we weren't having an impact, carbon footprint, because there's already an exploitation of our natural resources, even from our own industry. And we didn't want to play a factor in that. So, Rob, that was a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up because we sat and talked about that for an entire meeting almost. So,
we didn't want to price gouge. We didn't want to earth gouge. Like, again, I firmly believe the three of us have been doing this long enough. I should have grabbed a brewski tooski.
It's a Jones.
Well, I might get one.
Non-sponsored.
Maybe soon.
Yeah, I feel like think about this. Corn steep liquor would normally be a waste product, right? So it's going to go. It's going to go into cattle feed. It's going to go into something else. So that in the food industry we would call that upcycle, right? So we're upcycling that ingredient. We're saving it from a landfill, saving it from a wasteful process, and we're putting it in or valorizing it into a better process, right? So that's number one. Seaweed, the producers we've been working with have been in business for decades. They're a prominent community member over there in Ireland. And you can imagine when you get over there to Europe, the sustainability and the laws and the requirements that are there. It's even more so than over here. So that's number two. The mycorrhizae and the bacteria, obviously, you're going through different processes to grow them, but that's very efficient, very low carbon step there. So everything that we've got in here, the polymer itself is based off of food grade, aspartic acid, and then polymerized with high yields. So everything in here is very efficient, very focused. It's not a messy process. You're not putting out a lot of caustic materials in the environment, things along those lines.
Very cool, Mr. Murray.
It makes me feel really good about the product, even better.
Yeah, we do. We get a lot of questions asking, is this an organic product? And I think we had a whole conversation about whether or not it's organic, whether we care for it to be organic. OMRI certification is something that is very common and known. OMRI stands for Organic Materials Review Institute. We talked about potentially having it and getting those certifications, but there's a lot to it. And there's really a lot of hoops you got to jump to. Can you talk, George, a little bit about kind of OMRI certification and why it may not be the best way to go about it?
Yeah, OMRI certification is OMRI is run by a group, of people, and there's a fee when you want to register, a product, right? And at some point in time, you got to weigh the benefits of going through that process of looking at what OMRI has approved on their list. And I think some of the stuff on their list is legitimate. That's organic, and some of their list is a bit of a head scratcher. And I think sometimes OMRI bends their own rules depending on who wants to belly up to the plate and get a product that's registered as organic. And so anything run by a group of people is corruptible. At the end of the day, and so we didn't go into this thinking, hey, how can we make this product, OMRI approved? We went into it thinking and having the same discussion about how can we make a product that's, kind of designed from the environment and for the environment, and how can we end up with a product that delivers the maximum value to the users? And those were really the important questions for us. Now, whether that fits into someone's belief system and how they grow or not, I get that. Everyone's going to have their own system, and some people, depending on their grow, they're going to have to see some sort of organic certification from a third party. But certainly it's not. That wasn't where we wanted. We just wanted the best product we could. That's doing the best thing for the environment, and then on the back end, it's like do you want to use it in your grow? There's nothing in here that shouts non-organic to me, but OMRI and some of the third-party agencies have a different definition than what I have about what should be and could be organic and what isn't, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, it's like I just kind of look at it like a Better Business Bureau thing, or like you want to get your taxes done, but you won't do it unless it's a CPA. It's like, for taxes? Okay, but some people just want that comfort. It's I understand it, but at the same time, that's where like we talked about from the beginning of this episode, is understanding your inputs and what this stuff is, and then you'll start to understand how it's derived and where it's come from, and that you should be able to understand those inputs more before you start waiting for a sticker that's on the front that you just trust. Because blindly trusting these things is just, it's crazy, especially in an industry that goes up and down. Like, again, with 2020 and on, there was this massive increase and then a massive dip that actually stabilized a little under where it was. So now it's got people who are scraping to get the money they can. And I think that's, I'm skeptical of those. With my buddy Trey, my co-host on CLtv, he managed to grow a store for years. And there was a lot of reps from brands that were just like, yeah, we're not going to repay for the Amrai stuff this year. They increased the price. And it's like, and not knocking it, some people that may be their belief system, like you said, but I think it's more understanding what that brand is and what that validity is before using it as a merit of trust.
No, well said, totally.
We've talked about this many times, that's what's going to define tomorrow's products are the companies that are going over and beyond just trying to make a buck, because that was the race. At the beginning, it was who can make the quickest buck with the most amount of money already. But that game's starting to weed its way out, and now it's starting to see that we want great products by good people that are giving back to the community. And George, you're doing just that, and we're honored to call you a part of the team and to have you as our lead scientist, our lead guy for this. You dropped some incredible gems here, George. Really appreciate it.
One last thing before we can't let George
go ahead,
leave.
please.
Two.
I got a couple. I got one more thing too.
All right.
Like I,
this one we talked about via email.
That was such a good close. It was such a good close.
I know.
I'm pretty good. I always
Jesse,
got to try to time it, and I miss it.
This is where he's always like, "What's my value?" I'm like, "Dude, P, you're a freaking entertainer for one. For two, you're the glue, baby. You make this tripod work." You talking about?
Dude, I was loving it. I was sailing on the way out. I'm like, "This is great."
He's like, "All right, cool."
Go ahead. Go to the questions. Yeah,
so just real quick, we talked about this earlier via email, which again, shout out to the team. There's a massive team working on this, which I didn't realize how many people care about. I see the passion is there. It's awesome. Plus their job, of course, but the passion, I love it. But how often do you use the stash blend? How often would you use it? I know how often I do, but we discussed it earlier.
We've always approached this as a once a week. You know what I mean? Could you do more than that? Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely no problem, right? But
ROI.
At a minimum, we'd like to see it once a week, right? And look at that return on investment. That's our belief system, right? Once a week until you get into your flowering, and then sail on. Unless again, you've got an established soil environment, you want to keep the population up, keep using it. But once a week, where we see most people starting.
So, and for beards, then it's not a beard growth thing, then, obviously. We were talking about that earlier, and there's a lot of organic, natural inputs in here that people read, and I think that don't look like plant stuff. And this is where that conversation of organic is like, look more into what's in this, and it's surprised. I'm still learning more about the inputs that I'm like, why hasn't we had this in this industry? Like, it's crazy how long it's been, but appreciate you helping us get it.
One of the inputs that we haven't talked about, that I think we need to talk about because it's one of the most important ones, one I'm excited about, is the silicon. So a lot of people actually asking about the silica. Can you talk to us about like the silica that's in this blend and how to make it plant available and so on and so forth?
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit before. You've got silicon dioxide in there, right? A nanoparticle silicon dioxide, and what it's kind of dual purpose, right? I mean, we do care about how this package sits and how it sets up and the flowability, and you've got a lot of elements in there. They're organic elements. They want to grab on the water, and do different things in the mix. So the silica on its own in the mix, is going to help alleviate some of those symptoms. Not entirely, like we've talked about before. This is a sensitive piece. A lot of technology. You got to take care of it. One of those, if they're cold, if you're cold, they're cold type deal. Don't leave it out too hot. Don't leave the bag open. Yada yada. But at the end of the day, then with that small of a particle, with the biology we have in there and the plant growth that's happening, you're going to convert that into silicon dioxide, which there's a little bit of that's available to the plant from a soluble silicon perspective, but then you're going to convert that, putting a hydrogen or putting a couple hydrogens on it, and turn that into mono or orthosilicic acid, and that's the plant available form of silicon, and that's that process that we want to happen in an organic situation where you've got biology growing, you've got organic acids being released at the roots, you've got hydrogen ions being released by the plant. That's what's going to feed that conversion, right?
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to make sure we touched upon, because that is a real important piece of all this.
Agreed. Definitely agree with that.
Sweet. Oh, yeah. Well, I already said my outro, so see you guys.
Yeah.
No, I'm just
you did your job and some.
I appreciate you, George. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks, George.
I want to give a huge shout out to George, his entire team, Growers House for everything, that putting this whole plan together. Today is the official launch day, so if you're watching this on YouTube later, George, today's the day. It's launch day today, and orders have been coming in.
That's
fantastic.
why he made the time, man. Like, to be able to drive. I mean, literally on the road, the man stopped to drop and. Major bars, whether you had 1 or 2 bars, you dropped like 16 at least.
Yeah, you dropped a lot more than 1 or 2. I don't care what your cell phone says.
My man.
Verizon can take a hike.
That's awesome, man. You guys are great. It has been an honor and a pleasure. I never take it lightly that I've got a great group of people to work with, a great group of growers surrounding me. What a dream, right? It's great.
Thank you. Thank you, George. It's an absolute honor, man. We will definitely do another episode in a far more comfortable setting, and sure. Maybe we'll hit this again, Operation 2.0.5, because we already did an episode. You can see that on From the Stash over on YouTube. George, thank you so much, brother. Drive safe, eh?
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Bye, guys.